Hello everyone and welcome to the chapter number 44 of Blender Master Course, Geometry Nodes, Part 1 of Creating a Magical Shield Scene. In this chapter and the upcoming chapter, we'll be completing this scene, and for today's chapter, we'll be learning all these topics in complete detail. And yes, if you are new to this course, then do check out the previous 44 chapters from the link of the playlist in the pinned comment. So the first topic for today's chapter is understanding the scene time node. So for this, let's first go to the Geometry Nodes workspace, and in the Geometry Nodes editor, click on the new button. Now we'll be understanding the scene time node with the help of a UV sphere. So press Shift plus A, go to Mesh, and in Primitives, select the UV sphere. Let's place it over here. Now suppose we want to create an animation where this UV sphere scales up in the Z axis. So first of all, I'll be adding a transform geometry node by pressing Shift plus A, then in Geometry, go to Operations and select the transform geometry node. Let's place it over here, and now with the help of the scale values in this node, I can control the scaling of the UV sphere. Now even though I can insert a keyframe at the scale value in the Z axis and create the entire animation manually by using the timeline editor, but an easier way to do it is to use the scene time node. So first of all, let's add it here. So press Shift plus A, go to Input, and in Scene, select the scene time node. Let's place it over here. Now I can use this scene time node in order to create the animation of the UV sphere scaling down in the Z axis. But before that, let's also add the Combine XYZ node to control the scaling only in the Z axis. So press Shift plus A, go to Utilities, and in Vector, select the Combine XYZ node. Let's place it over here, and now I'll take the second socket of the scene time and connect it to the Z axis. Then I'll take the vector socket and connect it to the scale. Now what the scene time node does is that it simply creates an animation where the scaling in the Z axis will increase from a value of 0 to infinity. However, to view the UV sphere in the scene, I also need to change the values in the X and Y axis to 1. And now if I play the animation by pressing the space bar, then you can clearly see that the scaling of the UV sphere is increasing from a value of 0 in the Z axis. And this is because of the scene time node. And because I have connected the second socket in this node, the animation will be created as per the seconds. However, if I take the pointer to the frame number 1, and now if I take the frame socket and connect it over here and play the animation again, then you can clearly see that this time the animation is very fast, and that's because we have used the frame socket here. So in most of the cases, we'll be using the second socket in order to get a realistic animation. Now the next node to understand is the quadrilateral node. To add it over here, first I'll delete all these nodes by pressing X, then press Shift plus A, go to Curve, and in Primitives, select the quadrilateral node. Let's place it over here and connect it to the group output. Now let's go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad, and so the quadrilateral is simply any closed shape which has 4 sides. In fact, you can change the type of quadrilateral from the mode option here. So by default, the first one, which is the rectangle, is selected, and here you have the options like width and the height, and using these values, I can easily control the width and the height of the rectangle. Then the next available mode is the parallelogram, and again I have the width and the height option, and we have an additional option which is the offset parameter. So by using the width, I can control the width of the parallelogram. Then by using the height, we'll control the height of the parallelogram. Then from the offset value, we can control the offset, or basically the tilting of the parallelogram to the left or the right. Now the third mode available is the trapezoid, and for those of you who don't know what a trapezoid or a trapezium is, it is basically a quadrilateral which has at least one pair of opposite sides parallel to each other. Now by using the height value, we can control the height of the trapezoid in the Y axis. Then we have the bottom width, and if I change it, then basically the width of the bottom side will change like this. Then the next option is the top width, and by using it, we can control the width of the top side of the trapezoid. Then we have the offset, by which we can control the tilting of the trapezoid to the left or the right. Then we have the kite mode, where I can change the width like this, the bottom height, and similarly the top height of this quadrilateral. Then we have the last option, which is the points mode, and you can use it to create any type of parallelogram simply by changing the position of the points. For example, in the point 1, if I try to change the position in the X axis, then you can see that the position of the first point will begin to change like this. Then you can do the same with the Y axis or the Z axis, and yes, you also have the option to change the position of all the 4 points of the quadrilateral. Now we'll be creating this shield with the help of the quadrilateral node. So first of all, I'll change the mode of the quadrilateral to kite, and then to fill it, we'll be adding the fill curves node. So press Shift plus A, go to Curve, and in Operations, select the fill curve node. Let's place it over here, and I'll change it to Ncons. Now in order to give some thickness to it, we'll be using the extrude mesh node. So press Shift plus A, go to Mesh, and in Operations, select the extrude mesh node. Let's place it over here. Now we'll reduce the offset scaling to something like 0.2 or 0.3, and this is how it looks now. We have applied the extrusion effect to the quadrilateral, and now suppose you want to scale down this top face, and for this, we'll be using the scale elements node. So press Shift plus A, go to Mesh, and in Operations, here we have the scale elements node. Let's place it after the extrude mesh node, and now if I try to change the scale value, then the entire mesh object will begin begin to scale up and down. However, to apply the scaling only to the top face, I'll take the top socket and connect it to the selection in the scale elements node. And now if I try to reduce the scaling, then in this case, only the top face is getting scaled down. Now to give some interesting pattern to our shield, we'll be using the dual mesh node. To add it here, press Shift plus A, go to mesh and in operations, select the dual mesh node. Let's place it over here. And as discussed in one of the previous chapters, the dual mesh node will convert the vertices into faces and the faces into vertices. However, to give it an interesting look, I'll split these edges and then scale down the faces. So press Shift plus A, go to mesh and in operations, select the split edges node, place it over here, and to scale down the faces, I'll take the scale elements node from here, press Shift plus D to create a duplicate and place it after the split edges node. Now let's also increase the scaling to something like 0.9 or 0.92, and now it looks like this. If you want to increase the number of vertices in the mesh and give it an even more realistic look, then for this we can use the subdivide mesh node before the dual mesh. So press Shift plus A, go to mesh and in operations, select the subdivide mesh. Let's place it over here, and with this the number of vertices and the faces in the mesh has increased. Now to extrude these faces, I'll be adding the extrude mesh node. So press Shift plus A, go to mesh and in operations, select the extrude mesh node. Let's place it over here. Let's reduce the offset scaling to something like 0.1 or 0.2, and this is how the basic structure of the shield is looking right now. Now to add the original quadrilateral below the shield with the subdivision applied, we'll be using the join geometry node. So press Shift plus A, go to geometry and select the join geometry node. Let's place it over here, and now I'll connect the subdivide mesh node to the join geometry, and now you can see here that we have this subdivided quadrilateral mesh placed below the shield. Now to ensure that the edges appear properly on the boundaries, turn on the key boundaries in the dual mesh node. Now one more thing, you can see here that the bottom is not covered, and to fix this problem, we'll simply connect the original quadrilateral with the fill effect because of the fill curve node to the join geometry. Now to give the shield some basic material, we'll be adding the set material node. So press Shift plus A, go to material and select the set material node. We'll place it after the extrude mesh node, and to create the material, go to the material properties, and we have this default material added here. So let's select it from the list in the set material node. Now let's also do one more thing, which is to rotate the shield and move it upwards in the Z axis. So press R, X and type 90. Let's also move it upwards like this. Now to create the shield material, I'll first turn on the render view from here. Now for a better lighting, I'll select the light, go to the object data properties and change the type of light from point to sun. Let's also reduce the strength to something like 4 or 5. Then to move the light, press G, Y and place it over here. Let's also move it in the X axis, and now to rotate the light, press R, then X and rotate it like this. And with this, we have a proper lighting in the scene. Let's select the shield again, and for the material, I will change this window to the shader editor. So click on this icon and select the shader editor. Now if I zoom out, then here we have the default material applied to the shield. But to make it look like a realistic shield, I'll change the base color to grey by reducing the brightness from here. Let's also increase the metallic strength to a very high value like 0.9 or 1. Now to give the texture a 3D look, we'll be using the bump node. So press Shift plus A, go to vector and select the bump. Let's place it over here and connect it to the normal of the principal BSDF. Then for the texture, we'll be using the noise texture. So press Shift plus A, go to texture and select the noise texture. Now we'll connect the factor socket to the height. Then to connect the noise texture to the texture coordinate and the mapping node, I'll select the noise texture and then press Ctrl plus T. Now just like always, I'll take the object socket and connect it to the vector. Let's also reduce the scaling in the noise texture to something like 0.5 or 0.7. Let's also reduce the bump effect to something like 0.1 or 0.2. Let's also increase the detailing to its maximum value of 15. And now this is how our shield looks right now. However, you can notice some minor issues at the side of the shield, and to fix them, we'll go back to the geometry nodes editor from here, and I'll change the extrusion value in this node to something like 0.13 or 0.14, and now the shield looks perfect. Now moving ahead, we'll also be adding some glow at the back of the shield by creating another material and assigning that material to the back face. So first of all, I'll go to the material properties and create a new material. Let's also create a duplicate of the set material node by pressing Shift plus D and drop it in between the subdivide mesh node and the join geometry. Let's also change the material to material.001, and to get a glowing effect, I'll go to the emission. Let's increase the emission strength to something like 10. Let's also change the color, and I will be assigning the green color. And now we have the glow effect applied to the back face. In order to view the glow properly, I'll go to the render properties and change the render engine to cycles. And this is how our shield is looking right now. You can see that it has the metal at the front, and from the back, the green light is emerging. For now, I'll change the render engine back to EV. Now moving ahead, let's also add a plane below it, which will be the base of the landscape. So press Shift A, go to mesh and select the plane, and to control the scaling and the number of vertices of the plane from the geometry nodes editor, simply add the grid node. So press Shift plus A, go to mesh and in primitives, select the grid node. Let's place it over here. Now let's increase the size to something like 30 meters. Let's also increase the number of vertices in the X and Y axis to a much higher number like 100. And now we'll be creating a path on the plane, and we'll be adding some flowers on that path of the plane. And and for this we'll be using the edge paths to selection node. If you remember, in this chapter we learnt about the edge paths to curve node, and the node that we are going to explore today is also very similar to the edge paths to curve node. So to add it here, press Shift plus A, go to mesh, and in operations select the edge paths to selection node. Let's place it over here. So by using the start vertices socket, we'll tell this node about that particular vertex from where the path should begin. So let's add a compare and the index node for this. So I'll press Shift plus A, go to utilities, and in math select the compare node. Let's place it over here. Then to add the index node, press Shift plus A, go to geometry, and in read select the index node. Let's place it over here. Now I'll change the input type to integer and the operation to equal. Now if I take the index socket and connect it to the value A and take the result socket and connect it to start vertices, then in this case we are simply telling this edge path to selection node that the path should begin with the vertex having the index value equal to 0. Now to create a shortest path between any two vertices, we'll be using the shortest edge paths node. To add it here, press Shift plus A, go to mesh, and in read select the shortest edge paths. Let's place it over here. Now I'll connect it to the next vertex index here, and for the end vertex we'll be creating a duplicate of these two nodes by pressing Shift plus D and placing them over here. We'll be using them to define the index value of the end vertex. So I'll take the result socket and connect it over here. Now to view the path, we'll be distributing some points on that path. So press Shift plus A, go to point, and select the distribute points on faces. Let's place it over here. And now if I take the selection socket of the edge path to selection node and connect it to the selection in the distribute points on faces, then it will distribute the points only on the shortest path between the vertices having the index value as per these nodes. Right now, the value of B in both the compare nodes is equal to 0, and that's why we can't see any points here. And now if I try to change the index of the end vertex, then you will begin to notice hardly any points in the scene. And this is because we need to connect something to the edge cost in order to define the path, and we'll be connecting it to the random value node. So press Shift plus A, go to utilities, and select the random value. Let's place it over here and connect it to the edge cost. Now this random value node connected to the edge cost will give some random value between 0 and 1, and the edge cost will only consider the value which is lower, and then it will make the path accordingly. If you want to understand the short edge paths node in complete detail, then you can watch this lecture where we understood it in complete depth. Now to increase the number of points, first I'll go to the density and let's increase it to something like 100. Let's also change the index value of the end vertex to something like 5000 or 6000. Let's also use the join geometry node in order to view the plane along with the points. So press Shift plus A, go to geometry, and select the join geometry node. Place it over here and connect the grid node to the join geometry. Now these points are distributed on this path, and to modify it, let's again try to change the index value of the end vertex, and I'll keep it to something like 8000 or 9000, and this is how it looks now. Now let's also create the flowers to place at these points. So press Shift plus A, go to mesh, and select the plane, press G, X, and place it over here. Now first of all, we'll be using the geometry nodes to convert this plane into a star. So click on the new button, then press Shift plus A, go to curve, and in primitives, select the star node. Let's place it over here, and now you can see that the plane is converted into a star. You can control the number of points from here, then you can even control the inner radius or the outer radius, and you have the twist parameter to create this amazing twist effect on the star. Now the reason for adding the star node is that we'll be using it to make the flower by adding the petals at the different points of the flower. So for this, let's first make the flower petals. So press Shift plus A, go to mesh, and select the plane, press G, X, and move it over here. Then go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad. Now to convert it into a petal, tab into the edit mode, press G, Y, and let's place it upwards. Now press 2 for the face select mode. I'll select the top face, and to make the petal longer, press G, Y, and bring it up like this. Let's also add some loop cuts. So press Ctrl plus R, then left click and right click to finalize. Press 1 for the vertex select. I'll select this vertex, press G, Y, and move it up like this. Let's also add 2 more loop cuts on the sides. So press Ctrl plus R, make a loop cut over here, then again press Ctrl plus R, and we'll have another loop cut over here. Now I'll select these two vertices, press G, Y, and move them slightly upwards in order to give the tip of the petal a slightly curved or rounded look. Now you can see that the petal is completely flat, and to make it look curved, let's add some loop cuts. So press Ctrl plus R, use the scroll wheel to increase the number of loop cuts, then left click and right click to finalize. Now to give it a rounded look, turn on proportional editing by pressing O, then press G and Z and move it down like this. Let's also increase the size of the proportional editing tool by using the scroll wheel and then left click to finalize. Now let's come out of the edit mode. Now to make the petal look thicker, tab into the edit mode, press A to select everything, O to turn off the proportional editing, and press E to extrude it like this. Now let's come out of the edit mode, right click and select shade smooth by angle. Now to place these petals as instances on different points of the star, I'll select it, go to the geometry nodes editor, press Shift plus A, go to instances and select the instance on points. Let's place it over here. Now I'll take the plane.002, which is the flower petal, and drop it here. Then we'll connect the geometry socket to the instance. Now we need to fix the rotation properly, and for this we'll be using the align Euler to vector node. So press Shift plus A, go to utilities, and in rotation select the align Euler to vector. Let's place it over here and connect it to the rotation in the instance on points. Then press Shift plus A, go to geometry, and in read select the normal, and we'll connect it to the vector socket in the align Euler to vector node. Now I'll select the flower petal, tab into the edit mode, press A to select everything, then we'll rotate it in the X axis by 90 degrees. So press R, X and type 90. I think that we should also reduce its thickness. So press S, Y and reduce the thickness like this. Now let's also rotate it in the Z axis by minus 90 degrees. Then go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad and see we basically need to place this flower petal at its origin point, which is the yellow point here. So press G, Y and let's place it over here. And now this is how the basic structure of the flower looks. Let's also do one more thing, which is to go to the X-ray mode by pressing Alt plus Z. Then select these vertices, press O to turn on the proportional editing, press G, X and make them look curved like this. Let's come out of the edit mode and now this is how the flower petals are looking right now. Let's also control the radius of the flower petals. So come back to the object mode, select this flower. And now with the help of the inner radius and the outer radius value in the star node, I can control the radius of the flower petals. So we'll increase the inner radius first and keep it to something like 2 meters. Then for the outer radius, we'll be keeping it to a value of somewhere near 2.5 meters. And so this is how the flower looks now. I'll do one more thing, which is to select the flower petal again, tab into the edit mode, press A to select everything, turn off the proportional editing and let's scale it down in the Y axis. This will reduce their area like this and now the flower petals look perfect. Now if you want your flower petals to be like opened, then for this, in the edit mode, press R, Y and rotate the flower petal like this. So this is how you can modify the look of your flower, like changing the rotation or the radius values. Now for the remaining part of the flower, we'll be adding a UV sphere at the bottom, and for the stem, we'll be using the cylinder mesh. So press Shift plus A, go to mesh and in primitives, select the UV sphere. Let's place it over here. Then to add the joint geometry node, press Shift plus A, in geometry, select the joint geometry node. Now we'll connect the UV sphere to the joint geometry, and to move it downwards, we'll be using the transform geometry node. So press Shift plus A, go to geometry and in operations, select the transform geometry. Let's place it over here and we'll move it down in the Z axis like this. Now for the stem part, press Shift plus A again, go to mesh and in primitives, select the cylinder. Let's place it over here and connect it to the joint geometry. Now we have the cylinder placed over here, and to control its position and the thickness, I'll take the transform geometry node, press Shift plus D to create a duplicate and place it over here. First of all, I'll reduce the scaling in the X and Y axis. Let's also make it longer by increasing the scale in the Z axis, then move it down like this, and now this is how the flower looks. Now let's give some materials to the petals. So I'll go to the render view again, then I'll select the flower petal and change the window to the shader editor. Click on the new button and now here we have the default material applied. So for the material of the flower petal, we'll be using the emission and we'll assign different colors to the different flower petals. So first of all, let's increase the emission strength to something like 10, and to assign different colors, let's add the color ramp. So press Shift plus A, go to converter and select the color ramp. Now I'll take the color socket and connect it over here. Now to give a random color to each of the petals, we'll be using the object info node. So press Shift plus A, go to input and select the object info, place it over here and connect the random to the factor socket. Now for the colors, first of all, I'll change the interpolation to constant. Let us change the first color by increasing the brightness and I'll keeping the red color. Now for the second pointer, let's change the color to the pink color. Then for the third one, I'll click on the plus icon here and change the color to yellow color. Now to place these pointers at equal positions from each other, click here and select distribute stops from left. Now let's also make the material for the rest of the flower, like the UV sphere and the cylinder. So for this, let's go to the geometry nodes editor, select the flower, and before assigning the material, let's do one more thing, which is to slightly scale up the UV sphere. So we'll increase the scaling to something like 1.2 and now it looks perfect. Now for the material, press Shift plus A, go to material and select the set material, place it over here. Now I'll go to the material properties and click on new material. Now I'll click here and select the material.003. Let's also change the base color to the yellow and increase the brightness from here. Similarly for the stem, we have this cylinder connected to the transform geometry node. So let's create a duplicate of the set material node and place it over here. Let's create a new material and I'll change the base color to green color. Let's assign the material.004 and now this is how the flower looks now. Now to place the flower at different points on the plane, I'll select the plane, press Shift plus A, go to instances and select the instance on points. We'll drop it after the distribute points on faces. Then I'll select the plane.001, which is the flower, and bring it in the geometry nodes editor. Now to use it as the instance, I'll take the geometry socket and connect it over here. Let's reduce their size to something like 0.2 or maybe 0.1, and now this is how our scene is looking right now. Let's also place the flowers properly. So press Shift plus A, go to geometry and in operations, select the transform geometry. Let's place it over here. Let's bring it slightly upwards in the Z axis like this. Let's also reduce the density to something like 25 and change the seed value to get a different result. Now I think that we should do one more thing, which is to change the color of these petals. Right now, the emission effect is not visible properly. So to solve this problem, I'll select the petal again, change the window to the shader editor, and instead of connecting the color ramp to the emission, we'll connect it to the base color. Let's also reduce the emission strength to 0, and finally this is how our scene is looking right now. We have these flowers placed on the path which you can easily modify by going to the geometry nodes editor, selecting the plane. Then in the end vertex, you can change the value in the compare node. Then you can increase or reduce its density from here. And with this, we arrive to the end of this chapter. Today we learnt about lots of geometry nodes, created this simple flower, placed it on the path. We even created this shield by using geometry nodes and also added the glow effect to the back face. In the next chapter, we'll be learning about some more geometry nodes and we'll also be finishing our scene completely. So our next chapter will be the chapter number 45, Geometry Nodes, part 2 of creating a magical shield scene. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel, press that notification bell so that you can get timely updates about the upcoming chapters. Thank you for watching and we'll see you in the next one.